Welcome to the Imagineering Education Podcast. This is Thomas Riddle. Thanks for joining us for conversations held at the crossroads of education and design, with a healthy dose of inspiration from Disney's Imagineers. Each week, we feature pertinent commentary on relevant issues and informative interviews with leaders and practitioners from the fields of education, design, entertainment, and more. On this episode, we'll be exploring the importance of creativity in the classroom with two outstanding practitioners, Devan Lewis and Jessica Schenck. Devan is currently a science teacher at McFarland Middle School in Othello, Washington, and she's also an avid Disney fan. Her master's degree is in informal science education with an emphasis on learning outside the classroom and across the lifespan. This is her 13th year teaching and has added a course in Imagineering to her class list for this year, but more on that in a minute. Jessica is the new principal at McFarland Middle School and is in her 17th year in education, with 13 years spent teaching in grades 3 through 8, as well as time spent as the Othello School District's Director for STEAM Education. Always a lifelong learner, she has pursued continuing education opportunities that have included Space Academy for Educators, Raspberry Pi certification, as well as certification in English language learner strategies. Her goal is to provide all students with the opportunity to learn and grow into their interests and passions. I am so excited to have such an amazing duo from the same school sharing their insights with us today. Devan, Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I was very excited to hear from Devan, who reached out to me a few weeks ago about her class that she's going to teach this year on Imagineering, and learned that she found out about our work through Jessica, who had shared the podcast. So Jessica, thanks for doing that.
Of course.
So on this podcast, we talk a lot about stories and their importance. So I was just wondering, from the both of you, what is your story? What was the inspiration for you to become an educator? So Jessica, if we could start with you, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I can say that I've always had a passion for changing the world for the better, but I always thought I was going to do that as a journalist, not as a teacher or not as an educator. In fact, I got my first degree in journalism, and I was a newspaper reporter in Yakima, Washington. And while it was a fun and exciting job, it wasn't as satisfying on a day-to-day basis as I thought it would be. And on the education beat, I saw that teachers and students were doing amazing things, and eventually went back to school and got my master's in teaching. And I can say 100% that I found my calling. I've never worked harder in my life, but I know I'm making a positive difference on a daily basis. And as I've developed as an educator, I think something that I reflect on a lot is my own education and my own upbringing as a student, as I know a lot of educators do. And I've realized that one of my whys is to be a champion for developing student passions, as well as making sure that I am never standing in the way of what a student might do. I vividly remember my own fifth grade teacher telling me I'd never be good at math, and I believed him. And it was like this door just slamming shut, but I didn't realize it until years later. And so I want to make sure that I'm in the business of keeping pathways open for kids until they choose one path over another. And so that's my why. I think that's my story. I have loved classroom teaching. When I left the classroom almost 5 years ago, it wasn't an easy choice, and it wasn't the choice I thought I'd make. But our district created a new position, the Director of STEAM Education, and I realized it was just the right door at the right time to help both students and teachers more. Loved that job, absolutely loved it. And again, this principal job came open, wasn't something that I was necessarily looking for, but it was the right time and the right place. And so this is where I am doing hopefully good work right now.
So is this your first year as a principal?
It's actually technically my second year. Last year I was kind of a planning principal. I had support from the district office to kind of help me make that transition. But yeah, this is my first full year. It's like, fun COVID year.
Wow, what a year what a year to get into it. And I think you're going to do an amazing job. Jessica. So we wish you the best of luck this year. Devan, what about you? What was your story? How did you get into education?
I think if you asked 12-year-old me if I wanted to be a teacher, I would have told you, heck no. I loved learning from a very young age. I liked learning, but I hated being told what to learn. I always wanted to kind of do my own thing, and I think I got some of that in middle school. I took some science classes with a teacher, and he kind of focused my learning towards science. And so I loved science all the way up through high school until a teacher similar to Jessica told me I couldn't do what I wanted to. I wanted to be a pilot for the space shuttle more than anything. I wanted to go to space. I wanted to see the Earth from space. And this teacher told me, nope, you're too short. Your eyesight's bad. You can't wear glasses when you're on the space shuttle, which nowadays there's modern technology and I totally could have. But it kind of moved me in a different direction. And my summers were always spent at the Lake Wenatchee YMCA camp. I was there from kindergarten all the way up through, past college. And I think that's where my love of spending time with children really came in. My favorites were our little mini campers. They were our first through third graders. And they were just the cutest little things. So I went to college and said, all right, I'm going to work with kids. And I thought, well, I'm going to do it in the recreation management side. I wanted to work with kids in settings outside of school. I wanted to hang out with them at science centers, at zoos, aquariums, museums, wherever. And it just didn't, I took a bunch of classes in it and figured out that wasn't my thing. And so I thought, I'll be a history major. No, that wasn't it either. And finally, a friend of mine said, take this class with me. It's going to be fun. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I took an education class and was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And part of the program that I went through, we were required to do 10 hours of in classroom with teachers and students for every single class. And so I started taking these classes, and the more and more time I spent in classrooms, the more I realized this is where I need to be. So I thought, kindergarten. Loved those little kids. I'm going to go be a kindergarten teacher. No. I truly believe that every teacher has a niche in education and finds that right group of kids. And I figured out that middle school science was kind of my little corner of the world, and I love it. After college, I went to Oregon State University for my master's degree and worked with some phenomenal educators who worked outside the classroom setting. And I actually ended up working with the Oregon Zoo for my master's thesis and helped design their Red Ape Reserve exhibit. And so I saw the kind of other side of education where people were out there in person, just hanging out at the zoo, and saw how they learned as well. And I think I've brought a lot of that to my classroom setting. I like some of the unusual ways of learning. I like hands-on learning, maker spaces, and really having students not realize they're learning. They're playing and they're learning at the same time. And I think that's what I absolutely love. And I think my favorite thing about teaching is that I don't have to focus on any one thing. I feel like out in the science field, as a scientist, you have to pick, I'm going to do microbiology, or I'm going to focus really intensely on viruses. And I get to learn about everything all day, and I never get to stop learning. And I think that's what has fueled my love of learning and my love of teaching students how to learn, and that passion in science and passion in classrooms. And so this new class that I'm teaching is very much my passion project for this year, and intermixing my love of Disneyland at the same time.
You know, it's interesting that I've heard both of you mention the same word, and that's passion. I really love hearing that. And, you know, as a parent, that's who you want your kid to have, as a teacher who believes passionately in what they're doing. I would love to be a kid in both of your classes because it sounds like you both get that piece about passion. So what role do you think passion should play for teachers?
Devan and I were talking before this call just kind of about some of the reasons why we started making some of the changes that we have here at the building with some of the new classes that we've started. And I was just commenting to her that it has felt like in the past, for one reason or another, like a lot of our teachers and our students just didn't have a lot of joy in what they were doing, on what they were learning or what they were teaching. It was very just, it wasn't a lot of fun. And as a result, people weren't enjoying coming to work, and students weren't enjoying learning, and that resulted in, we weren't getting test scores that we wanted. Not that the world is about test scores, but it is the world we live in.
Right.
That it was, we had a lot of the behavior problems that, we were seeing day in and day out. We live in a very high poverty area. And so I think that idea of passion, if you're doing something you're passionate about, that leads to joy. And when you have those two things in the mix, you've created that culture for learning where people want to be, and that's where growth and that's where progress happens.
Devan, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's similar to what Jessica was saying. I think just that joy and that desire to come to work every day. I've always loved my job, but after a while, sometimes it just feels like it's, you go to work and you come home from work, and you go to work and you come home from work. And I think even though I love my job, it needed some joy, some passion. And some of these new classes kind of revived my joy in going to work. And even if this year we may not get to see kids in person, there's that joy there of being able to share with them the knowledge that I have, and really be able to engage them in something that maybe someday they can look back and say, hey, Miss Lewis taught me that in 7th grade science, and I remember it still. And that to me would be, that's one of the biggest joys in teaching, is someone, student coming back multiple years later and saying, I loved your class. I actually had a student do that the other day. She messaged me and said, she's now a junior, and she said, I loved your class. I still think about it every day, and we sing the cell song in our head every single time she needed it in biology. And just her passion for the class that she had when she was a 7th grader, still, that to me is the greatest thing you can get from teaching.
Amen. That's one of the highest compliments that a teacher can be paid, I believe, is to have a kid come back years later and say, you know what, you made a difference in my life. I really enjoyed what you taught me. And here's the thing too. If you guys noticed, it may not be that they remember every fact, all of the content you taught them, but you were just a safe place for them to become a whole person, a better person. And if you create atmospheres like you're talking about, where joy is cultivated, where passion is cultivated, kids are going to, or anyone for that matter, when you're going to learn better. All right, so we're talking about this, the importance of passion and joy, and it's really goes back to the importance of the classroom teacher. And what's interesting is that both of you said that you had an experience with a teacher who didn't inspire you to do what you wanted to do. As a matter of fact, kind of told you couldn't do that. So why are teachers so important when it comes to impacting the future of a kid and what they think they can or cannot do?
Well, I think maybe it comes to, it's kind of, we talk about that idea of, we're trying to get teachers to be less stages on a stage and more guides on the side. And because by nature, I think we often, we teach because we have a lot to share. And so teachers are so important because we have all of this information, and unless the teachers that, shut those doors down, I think they don't realize the power they have to shed light on multiple paths. And I think teachers sometimes wisely get out of the way of their students learning. And unfortunately, there are some teachers that become those roadblocks. But we are keepers and holders of ideas that students may or may not have been exposed to, and students just light up when they see things or learn things that they haven't learned before, and we're the ones that get to be with them in the classroom during the day when that's happening. And that's just such a remarkable, wonderful position to be in. It could be used for good or bad.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I keep coming back to this idea that it was a bad thing. And at the time, I was definitely crushed. I wanted to be a pilot for the space shuttle more than anything, and I loved space. And this teacher did too. And I find it really interesting, though, because he told me I couldn't, I actually opened doors that I might not have opened previously. I was very science focused that year. I really loved science. Well, I didn't love my teacher that year, but I liked science. And I think what ended up happening is I kind of closed the door on science a little, but I also opened my door to art. And when I got into high school, I took art classes and drama classes. I actually took the same art class 3 years in a row, and I probably annoyed the heck out of my art teacher because he kept having to make up new projects for a class that didn't exist. And I think that led me to other avenues that led me to education. So even though, yes, there was this teacher and it was awful and I was devastated, I think that without that, I may have been very one-focused. Mm-hmm. And it really opened me up to doing some things where I found other things that I'm very passionate about. So I think it's good and bad. I think I think Jessica sounds like it was much worse than mine, but I almost am thankful to that teacher who said, well, maybe that's not your best option because you can't do this because right now, and he was right at that time. If you had bad eyesight, you couldn't fly for the U.S. military at all. And so he was right at the time. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have, at that, as a 7th or 8th grader at the time, I could not have jumped into a flight in a cockpit at all. But, 20 years later, I now say I could have.
Right. Well, two things. One, I think that what you're demonstrating from what you said is that characteristic we want of all our kids, and that's resilience. So when you face something and a difficult challenge or hardship, that you find a way to overcome it. But secondly, it's interesting that the real talk that the teacher had with you at the time could have been seen as something that was crushing, but it was, as you said, that was the facts on the ground at the time. And a lot of times we spend, we talk about it a lot on this podcast. We talk a lot about encouraging kids' dreams. How do you temper that?
I think that when, there's absolutely a role of a teacher and an educator is to help students make sound decisions and to be realistic about things. But at the same time, I think in developmentally, sometimes kids need to figure that out themselves.
That's good.
Instead of just being told, no, you can't do it.
Absolutely.
So like a lot of middle school boys still think they are going to be, they're going to play in the NFL, they're going to be professional soccer players, they're going to, do all of these things. And I can affirm that dream. I can say, absolutely, you are a great player. But what is your backup plan? Like, if that doesn't work out, and I sure hope it does, and if it does, I want you to come back and give me lots of money. But if it doesn't work out, what else are you? What else could you focus on so that if you get hurt, God forbid, you blow out your knee and you can't play anymore, how are you going to support your family? Or if you do make it big and you've got all kinds of money, how are you going to manage that money and not get taken advantage of? And so whether or not they end up pursuing that dream, that's for them to figure out. And it's my job to help them navigate all those in-betweens.
That is a beautiful answer to that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that might have been the difference between mine and Jessica's experiences also. Jessica's was very much you can't do math. You're not good at it.
Right.
Every kid can do math.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a realistic statement to say you're not good at math. No, you may not understand this concept right now, but every kid can do math. We have to believe that as educators. Whereas mine was more of a realistic, tone down the idea and find something more realistic for you to do, because at the time it wasn't realistic. And I think that's kind of what Jessica was alluding to, is that yes, we can be honest with kids and we can give them some realistic talk, but also say that, find a backup and let's think about some ways that learning the math right now is important. Right.
That's great advice from both of you. Thanks for sharing that. That's exactly where I was trying to go with that question. So, I think it's important to encourage adults in the same way, right? Don't you think? That, a lot of times we'll stop dreaming once we get to a certain age, or think, I can't really do this. And I think one thing I was really excited about is when Devan told me, Jessica, about your openness to having teachers create these courses that they're very interested in. I thought about, wow, what an awesome opportunity to have teachers dream about something they'd love to teach, something that they're really passionate about, and then give them an opportunity to put that into practice. So how did that come about, Jessica, and what's been the response from teachers?
Well, so last year, being in the position of spending the first half of the year as a planning principal, I was given some time and latitude to dream a little bit myself. And a question that I proposed to the leadership team, kind of following the design thinking process a little bit, was how might we organize our school to support the learning, creativity, and interests of all students and staff? And in part of the empathy building around that question, I had the opportunity to take a group of about 7 leadership team members down to the San Diego, California area.
Mm-hmm.
There were several schools down there that, as the STEAM director in the district, I'd had the opportunity to interact with and learn about. And I knew that if I wanted to kind of get co-collaborators on some of the ideas I had, they needed to see it themselves. And so we went to Design 39, and we went to Vista Innovation and Design Academy.
Love Vita. Sharks, go Sharks.
Yes. And so Dr. Chongla there, he blew our minds as far as you mean we could do that? You mean we could, we just kind of blow the doors off of how we design classes and design schedules. And one of my favorite moments from last year was sitting in the airport on the way home, listening to this group just talk a mile a minute about their what ifs and their ideas that they wanted to bring back to staff. I don't think I could have done any of the changes we made without that core group, who was kind of my change coalition. And we came back and we talked to the larger leadership team as a whole, and then we presented to the staff as a whole, and really challenged the staff, what are your superpowers? If you could do anything, if you could teach anything, what is it that you would want to teach? What is it that you love doing when you go home, that if you could come to school and get paid to do that you would want to do? And I would say, and some staff members were right away, absolutely, let's run, let's do this. And there were others that were cautious, rightfully so. What do you mean, teach anything?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is, would you actually fund that? Would you actually let me do that? And so there were a lot of questions. But in the end, once we came down with a couple prototypes of what our schedule could look like, what those classes could look like, what some of the guidelines would be, we had 96% of the staff vote in favor of the new schedule and the new class structure. And then we spent the spring really working on naming, what those classes would be, getting student feedback. Our we closed school on March 17th, right in the middle of all of this work, and never reopened again.
Yeah.
And our fantastic counselors still managed to reach out and contact nearly all of our students to get feedback on, what classes they wanted to take out of the ones that the staff had created. And, unfortunately, with where we're at right now, we are putting some of these classes on hold until we can get, just trying to keep balance in mind as far as what we're expecting kids to do online. We are taking some of these classes off the table until we can at least get back to a blended model. But we're ready to go. I mean, teachers spent the entire summer working on these classes, and people are really excited about them. Parents are excited about them. It's nice to be in a place where people are really looking forward to getting back to school and getting to do things a little differently.
That's what it's all about, right? Creating places that people want to be. And, that's when you go back to Disney, Walt Disney's dedication of Disneyland, he's talking about creating a place where teachers and students, he actually named that out, will be able to learn, and families will be able to, or adults and children will be able to learn and enjoy things together. And so it sounds like you're creating a type of Disneyland. I love it.
Well, we're not there yet, but we're on our way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's Disney literally wasn't built in a day. So I'm super excited about this. And I tell you what, kudos to you too, Jessica, for taking the team out to sea. Again, if you're listening and you're thinking about doing something like this, or you'd love to do something like this in your own school district, there's so much value in doing your research. You can do your research behind a computer. You can pick up a phone and call people and say, hey, tell me about your schedule. Tell me about what your program's like, what kind of electives you offer, or things like that. But going and seeing it firsthand, there's value in that, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I wish I could have brought my entire staff. I mean, that was hard to just bring such a small group, but
right.
I wanted to go.
But you know what, though? Like you said, having those champions that go see it and then come back, that's so vitally important whenever you're trying to institute some kind of change. Because it's not just you going off to some conference, getting jacked up and saying, oh, this is going to be great, and coming back. I think we've all been through that if you've been in education for a while. But having that core of champions to support you as well is a terrific way to do it. So Devan, you're getting to benefit from, you didn't get to go, but you're getting to benefit from this program. And so you're going to teach an Imagineering class. Tell us what in the world that's going to look like. I'm so excited to kind of follow your progress. What's it going to be like?
Well, I think my favorite part of this class is I don't know. I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know what the students are going to come up with. I've been doing research all summer, and I even jokingly asked Jessica if there was a way that we could somehow fund her and I to go on a worldwide tour of all 12 Disney parks and take photos and make sure that I was doing this right.
I'll carry your luggage. I'll volunteer.
Realistically said no. It's one of those pipe dreams. I've been to Disneyland numerous times in my life, and I absolutely love it. And so I want to do justice to this project, this dream of mine. And so I have bought as many Imagineering books as are out there that, my paycheck will afford. And I have read books by Maurice Clark, John Hench, some of those wonderful Imagineers that have put their brain into a book.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of the class is that students are basically hired on as junior Imagineers, and they're going to get a crash course in Mickey's 10 Commandments, the Imagineering Pyramid, almost like we would do with teachers, like a PD training,
right?
Professional development. And so I've taken things from Pixar in a Box and all these.
Are you using some of Lou Prosperi's stuff also?
Yes. Oh, his Imagineering Pyramid and his process. Yes, absolutely.
Great stuff. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, I have his book sitting here in front of me, and there's tabs on about every third page.
That's awesome.
And so what the kids will do is they're going to kind of get this crash course in Disney Imagineering, and then I'm going to task them with writing a proposal, creating a model, and pitching their plan for a new or redesigned Disney theme park at Walt Disney World. Walt Disney World has extra land, or I would have used Disneyland.
Right,
Disneyland is kind of, there's not a lot of extra space right now, without taking away some more of their parking, which I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate.
Right.
So the students are going to get a couple of ideas to kind of start from. I want to give them options for different theme parks and to include their needs, requirements, constraints. But past that, their interests and their desires are really what's going to lead this course. They kind of get to take on the role of different types of Imagineers. I didn't realize there's over 140 different jobs just in Walt Disney Imagineering.
Right.
Alone.
Yeah. It's
And there's not just one
mind-blowing.
of those people. There's hundreds of thousands of people every day working on these parks.
Yeah.
And so, they could be a musician, an artist, an architect, story writers, physicists. Wherever they decide they want to go is where I'm going to help them. I'm starting on a small scale. There's going to be 3 departments: a design department, a technology department, and an engineering department. And they're going to kind of start with the blue sky phase, design on a grand scale. I loved, I can't remember which book I was reading, but the idea, Hatch, the book Hatch, I can't remember the author, has this great brainstorming idea, and you can't say no, you can't say, you can't challenge anyone. Every idea is a good idea.
Yeah, yes and.
And so, yes, we've used that at McFarland as well. And this blue sky phase where just all these ideas, they're going to be given tons and tons of ideas, and then we start to narrow it down. There's going to be stakeholders that are going to come in. They're just people from around our district and community to give suggestions and tweaks, just like they would from the higher ups in Disney. And then really it's the kids lead this whole class. If they're a physicist and they decide they want to build a roller coaster, well, there's got to be a roller coaster somewhere in a park. I can't think of a single park in Disney that doesn't have some kind of roller coaster. So having them work with different physics principles to create a roller coaster, and then they have to tie into the design department to help them make sure that the theme matches the rest of the park, and the technology department to make sure everything lights up the way they want it to, and just this fantastic intertwined projects. I was watching the new documentary about Frozen 2 and how they made it, and I loved watching just the collaboration between different departments, and I really want to try and get kids to do that 21st century skill of collaborating and communicating on a grand scale with lots of people, and making sure that their idea comes across right. And not only that, but that they're going to get critiques and feedback that they may or may not like, and how to effectively take that feedback in, not get angry or take it personally, and challenge themselves to, as Walt Disney would say, to plus it. How can we make this better? How can we take what we just had an idea? Great. How can we make that even better? And then one of my favorite parts, I believe it was in One Little Spark by Marty Sklar. He talked about the Mouse Car and the Goof Award. And I wanted to make sure that we honored some of those kids who were creative and who showed leadership and perseverance and a growth mindset. And so I've kind of made my own Mouse Car and Goof.
Explain what
our Mouse Car is going to.
Yeah, explain what that is to people who may not know.
The Mouse Car and the Goof were awards that were given out to attractions that either did really well, which they got a mouse car, if they were exemplary and did well and went above and beyond, or the goof, which was the attractions that kind of flopped or didn't really pan out the way they intended it to work. And so with my students, I won't know the long term of how their individual attractions will go. So I wanted to award the students with awards. And so our mouse car, our excellence one, is for a student who exemplifies the Disney vision, who brought forth great ideas, innovation, or critique to the team. So that's kind of our award for creativity and leadership. And then the goof is to students who persevered even when the critique was rough. Their idea might not end up getting used, but they showed excellent team skills, they persevered, and they had a growth mindset to challenge themselves. Okay, this didn't work, but I have another idea. Let's go for it.
And that's exactly what we want kids to be able to do, right? To push through the hardship. Again, that goes back to resilience. Devan, how long will this course last? And how many days a week do you meet?
It's a semester, and I will, once we're back to normal traditional school setting, I will have my students every Monday and then either Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday. So I'll have them for 3 days a week.
Gotcha. So Jessica, is this counting as a related arts course within the kids' schedule?
So it's one of their electives.
Yeah.
One of the things we were able to do with our new schedule, traditionally our students had 2 electives that they didn't always have a whole lot of choice about. And we're expanding it to basically 3 elective slots during the day, and one of the shorter elective slots we're rotating on a more regular basis so that kids get exposed to more ideas and options.
What's that? What's the length of that class period? Just curious.
If it's a regular elective, it's 95 minutes. What we created a new time in our day that's 40 minutes a day that we're calling Mustang time, or the McFarland Mustang. And so we've got 2 different lengths. The Mustang time 40-minute classes are quarter-long classes, and then the 95-minute semester-long classes. And so it's just learned a lot this year about the ins and outs of building schedules.
Oh yeah, been there, done that, and but it's so exciting to hear schools that are taking a chance on doing this. So often we've gotten locked into to the bells to cells model. The bell goes off and you go to your next cell, and it's just you have to have everything the same time, or we haven't always been extremely creative throughout the history of American education with how we divide time up during the day. And so hearing things like this is fantastic. 95 minutes, 2 times a week, you can get a lot of work done because those I've taught on a block. I've been a principal on a block, on a modified block, on hybrid schedules. And if you can just have some deep times where you can go, you've got kids more than just 30 minutes or 55 minutes or whatever, you can get some really, really great work done. What I meant to ask, and you may forgive me if you told me, what grade is this Imagineering course being taught in?
It'll be a combined 7th and 8th grade class.
Okay, great. And Jessica, what are some of the other cool ideas that teachers have come up with for these courses?
I'm just going to read off just some of the list of some of the classes. We have a couple teachers teaching sports theory, which is just kind of ins and outs of different types of sports and how they're played. Another teacher has theme exploration, where she just has a little bunch of different projects that kids are going to do. We have drama for the first time. Speech and debate as an actual class, not just an after-school club. A new take on traditional home ec, but we're calling it real life skills. Video game science, emergency survival, astronomy. That's another one that Devan is doing. Basic mechanics, financial literacy, publishing, entrepreneurship, history through film. Just a lot of, and then we're revamping a design thinking class that we had previously, but we're going to kind of rethink how that's done, which is appropriate for a design thinking class. And so it's just kind of and what's cool about this is going to change year to year based on teacher interest and student interest. And so it's going to truly reflect who is in our building at any one time.
I am really thrilled to hear this. We did something similar to this when I was principal at a school here in Greenville, where we just did it for 2 weeks though, 2 solid weeks. The 2 weeks we come back from Christmas break, which is always kind of lethargic anyway, getting people back into the swing of things, we offered our high school, this was a private school, and we offered our high school kids a course of electives, very similar to what you're saying. The teachers could do whatever they wanted to teach. And then I led the middle school kids through a 2-week crash course in design thinking. And each, we had a different theme each year. And the first year had to do with poverty, how to solve, how might we solve for different issues related to poverty. And the second year the kids wanted to focus down on homelessness because they'd become so moved by the homeless plight in our community from their study the previous year with just global poverty and local poverty. And so I tell you, when you turn kids loose with that design process and give them some real world challenges, look out. It's amazing what these kids can do. And they're really, Walt Disney said that our greatest natural resource is the minds of our children. And he's absolutely right. But too often we'll hold kids back and say, well, they're just kids. But their ideas are fantastic. And if you can give them a common language like design thinking does, and you give them some mentors, some guides on the side, like you said, Devan, that can encourage them and cultivate them in that process, they can really come up with some great solutions to real world problems. And I think one of the reasons that I've seen is because their creativity, their imagination hasn't been kind of crushed, as they've gotten older, like it has often happened to so many adults. So you're speaking my love language, and I hear you're talking about design thinking classes for middle school kids there. So I'm looking forward to keeping up with what you guys are going to be doing. Now, let me ask you this: do you have plans then to modify these courses for your e-learning models until you get back face to face, or are you just putting these classes on hold?
It's kind of a phased in. Once we get to blended, where we can at least see kids face to face a little bit, we're going to start all the 95-minute electives, which would include Imagineering and design thinking and a few of the others. Mm-hmm. But we're going to wait until we're 100% back to do the must-sing time. And that's not so much because of the courses, it's because of the time that we'll have allotted with kids and making sure that we're still getting all of our core content minutes. Yeah,
it sounds like you're doing some great work. So I want to go back to one thing you said earlier, Devan, about your background in informal education. So you did your master's is in informal education science. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So for those who don't understand the terminology of informal education, we're talking about science museum and or history museum. Just in this case, like science center. Is that correct, Devan?
Yep.
Yeah. So
anywhere they're learning that's not a classroom.
Absolutely. And you see, and the thing that I love about this, because my current role is I'm in a kind of a hybrid space between formal and informal at the school district owned science center where I work. And the beautiful thing about informal education is that they bring a lot of that museum mindset with them, which is immersive. Did you pick up on that? Was there anything that you got from your master's degree about creating these immersive experiences that you've been able to apply in your classroom, Devan?
Wow, I don't think I've ever had anyone actually ask me about my master's degree and how it applies to classrooms. Mine was more, my master's degree was really focused on how people learned in a zoo. I worked at a zoo,
okay.
The Oregon Zoo to be exact. And one of the things that I think my biggest takeaway was, if you talked to a mom that was standing there at the zoo with her 3 kids, little kids, big kids, it didn't matter. They really didn't want to spend a lot of time, I'll call it conventionally learning. Mm-hmm. If they saw the big, huge sign that had a ton of writing on it, they ignored it. They might have scanned the headline and then walked away. And so one thing that we learned was that we wanted to create these much smaller, we called it a fact trail.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just one to two sentence blurbs just along the edge of there were a ton of them. But we noticed parents would stop, and any group really, they would stop and they would go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe," whatever the fact was. And I think that piece has really transferred for me. Middle schoolers don't, for the most part, like reading science texts.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. That's a reality in my life. And so we were actually just done in training today talking about chunking and really making that reading into much smaller pieces.
Right.
And so now, especially that we're going digital, I want to take our science texts and really chunk them down into just 2 to 3 sentences on a page in much bigger writing, so it's easier to see, it's not hurting their eyes, and it has pictures on it, so they're engaged with it. And I think that I took that a lot from my master's and really looking at what it's like to learn outside of the classroom.
Being able to take text or the main idea and boil it down into a chunk is valuable for teachers and for students to be able to process. And so that's interesting that's what you see that you brought over to your classroom. That's cool. So we're almost out of time, and I want to ask you one last question. I'm going to give you Tinkerbell's magic wand. All right. So if I gave you Tinkerbell's magic wand and you could change education in any way that you wanted to, how would you change it? Devan, we'll start with you.
I'd say 2 things. I know I'm only allowed one, but Tinkerbell would let me have 2. So that's okay.
Of course you would.
She's nice like that. So I'd say number 1, I would tweak our standardized testing to the point where it no longer exists. I don't think a lot of our kids, it's like what we've been saying, our kids don't learn the same way. Why should they have to show their learning in the same way?
Right.
And so for me, I would love if there was a way to have students engage in projects that they can show their learning. And that kind of leads into my second piece is I would create schools that are very project oriented, or I don't say product, but a project in a sense where it's a real life adventure for them almost, where they get to create and learn at the same time. And the product at the end is their assessment. It's their way of showing, hey, look, I learned how to do fractions this year, and here's how I did it. But it's in a much larger global sense of a project. And that to me is where I would be my big change in education. It's focusing on less on the sit and get type teaching and the standardized testing. And I would create these bigger schools that are project based.
Practical
and the
application.
Kids' projects are their assessment.
Yeah, I love that. That is, when you get that school, can I come teach there?
Absolutely.
Cool. Jessica, what about you?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Devan said there. I love data. I can geek out like none other over, getting scores back and pouring over what that means. But it does often feel like we're focusing on some of the wrong things sometimes.
Right.
And I do think there is a balance there.
Right.
But the creativity and the project-based outcomes, that would be so much fun. But I think if I could kind of wave that wand and do anything else, I think I would, I'd really want to break down all the barriers I see. And maybe as an administrator now, I'm seeing more of them than I did before.
Right.
But like access barriers. I
Right,
mean, just
right.
all of our students who don't have access to internet or devices and things that they need to be successful, or communication barriers. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking families in our community, fixed mindset barriers, just all of these things that kind of get in our way of moving as fast as we want.
Mm-hmm.
But I say that because, and I realize that the cool thing is that all of that is actually possible. You don't actually need a magic wand to do that.
That's right.
The magic would be in having it happen overnight. But I think we have the ability and the power to do those things. And that's why I'm coming to work every day. But it's hard work, though.
It is. And like you said earlier, I think both of you, this is really a calling, you know? And my hat's off to both of you for being willing to take risks, to do whatever it takes to meet kids where they are and to empower them with the understanding that they can change their situation and that they can move into the life that they could dream, you know, that they would want to have. So this has been very inspiring for me. I love talking with practitioners, people who are in the trenches doing this every day. And I just thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. It's been almost an hour, and I could keep on talking. I have a lot more questions. Maybe later in the year we could check back in and see how things are going. Would that be okay?
That'd be fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to hear kind of a mid-year check to see. Of course, it all depends on where we are in the world with COVID, but just to hear how things are going with such innovative ideas that you guys are doing there in Othello. So, if people wanted to follow the work that you guys are doing, what would be the best way they could follow you? Jessica, we'll start with you.
They can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Jess_Schenck. And another way to get to us really easily would be either on Facebook, McFarland Middle School, or our district website, which is othelloschools.org.
Great. And Devan, what about you?
My email through the school district, dlewis@othelloschools.org. Or I actually just started a Instagram page for kind of my journey through this Imagineering class, and it's at Middle School Imagineer. It's currently blank, but I can totally take people's comments and messages through there.
Okay, so if you are a listener and you have Instagram, you need to follow at Middle School Imagineer. We want to get her a lot of follows, get the class a lot of follows, and give them a lot of encouragement as they go through the year. So thanks so much for sharing that contact info, guys. And again, thanks for joining us for today's show. I've really enjoyed this, and we will make plans to follow up later in the year if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So if you've listened today and you'd like to learn more about our work, including our workshops, webinars, speaking engagements, and more at Imagineering Education, visit our website at imagineeringedu.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Imagineering Ed and Facebook at Imagineering Education. We hope you'll also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And when you do so, don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, remember that there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow just a dream away. Be blessed, everyone.